The medical bay was quiet compared to the chaos of the arena. Sora worked on Jiwoo's hands with focused efficiency, cleaning the tears in her skin and applying regenerative gel. The technology was advanced enough that the damage would heal quickly, but it still hurt. "You're lucky," Sora said, though her tone suggested Jiwoo had been anything but careful. No broken bones, no severed tendons, just deep bruising and surface tears. "Your conditioning actually worked." "It had to work," Jiwoo said. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had fully worn off. "I only had one chance." Yuna burst through the door, followed by Jihoon and several other human students. "That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. Everyone's talking about it. The whole station is going crazy. You broke his sword, Jiwoo. You actually broke his sword." "Half the instructors are arguing about whether it was legitimate," Jihoon added, but he was grinning. "The other half are calling it genius. Either way, you made humans look incredible." But Sora's expression was more concerned. "It's not all celebration out there. Some of the instructors are very angry. They think Jiwoo made a mockery of traditional combat arts." As if summoned by those words, the door opened again. An official-looking alien entered, carrying a datapad. "Hanjiwoo, you are summoned to appear before the Academy Council in 2 hours. The incident during your examination requires review." After the official left, Yuna sat down heavily. "This isn't good. The council only meets for serious issues. They could expel you, or they could commend her," Jihoon argued. "She didn't break any actual rules." Jiwoo barely heard them. Her mind was replaying the moment the sword shattered over and over. She had done exactly what she set out to do. Whether the council approved or not almost didn't matter. She had proven something to herself, to other humans, maybe to everyone watching. The 2 hours passed too quickly. Jiwoo changed into a clean uniform, her hands now wrapped in lighter bandages. Yuna insisted on coming with her to the council chambers, along with Minho, who had rushed to the station as soon as he heard what happened. Her brother hugged her carefully, mindful of her injured hands. "You're either the bravest person I know or the craziest. Maybe both." The council chamber was a large circular room with seating arranged in tiers. Representatives from a dozen species sat in judgment positions. At the center was a single chair where Jiwoo would have to stand. The gallery was packed with observers, instructors, senior students, and what looked like military officials. Velthar was already there, standing to one side. He nodded slightly when Jiwoo entered. The council head, an elderly Krolix with silver-tinted skin, called the session to order. "We are here to review the examination incident involving student Han Jiwoo. The matter is serious enough to require immediate deliberation." An instructor from the Draken delegation stood. "This student made a mockery of our traditions. She discarded her weapon, used techniques that have no place in blade arts, and destroyed an instructor's sword. This shows disrespect for everything we teach here." Another voice joined in, this one from a feathered species. "The examination is meant to test sword skills. She demonstrated no sword skills whatsoever. Her result should be invalidated." A third instructor, built like a boulder, added, "She used what amounts to a trick. Such tactics would never work in real combat. They have no practical value." Jiwoo's chest tightened. They were going to expel her. All that work, all that pain, for nothing. But then Velthar stepped forward. "Permission to speak on the student's behalf." The council head gestured approval. "Instructor Velthar, you were the subject of this incident. Your testimony is crucial." Velthar's voice carried through the chamber. "Honored council, I understand the concerns raised, but I must disagree with the characterization of this student's actions." He turned to look directly at Jiwoo. "She did not make a mockery of our traditions. She embodied their deepest principle." Murmurs ran through the chamber. "I teach that combat is about control." Velthar continued. "Control your weapon, control your opponent, control the battlefield." Han Jiwoo demonstrated all three, just not in the way we expected. She controlled her own body perfectly. The precision required to catch a blade with bare hands is extraordinary. She controlled me by understanding my patterns and exploiting them, and she controlled the battlefield by refusing to fight on my terms. He picked up a piece of the broken sword, which had been preserved as evidence. She studied materials science to understand where this blade was vulnerable. She conditioned her body specifically for this task. She analyzed hundreds of hours of my demonstrations to predict my opening move. This wasn't a trick. It was comprehensive strategic planning executed with precision. An instructor stood. "But such methods are dishonorable. Combat should be direct, strength against strength. Why? Velthar challenged. Because that's how it's always been done. For centuries, we've taught the same techniques, fought the same ways. We've become predictable. This student showed us that predictability is a weakness. Minho requested permission to speak from the gallery. When granted, he stood. I'm Commander Park Minho, Galactic Defense Force. I've served in 3 combat zones alongside mixed species units. May I offer a field perspective? The council head nodded. In actual combat, there are no rules about fighting honorably, Minho said. The enemy doesn't care about your traditions. In my experience, human soldiers have saved countless lives by thinking unconventionally. We adapt, we innovate, we find solutions others miss. That's not weakness, it's our strength. If you punish this kind of thinking in training, you'll produce warriors who are unprepared for real warfare. Daehyun stood next, introducing himself as a xenobiology researcher. I'd like to add scientific context. Humans evolved differently from most species here. Our survival strategy was never based on being the strongest or fastest. It was based on persistence, adaptability, and using tools creatively. What Jiwoo did wasn't contrary to human nature. It was the essence of human combat methodology. The debate continued for nearly an hour. Arguments flew back and forth. Some instructors remained adamant that Jiwoo had violated the spirit of the examination. Others, particularly those from species that valued innovation, argued she had demonstrated exactly what combat training should teach. Finally, an unexpected voice joined the discussion. An elder from the Krolik species, one of the most traditional warrior cultures, stood slowly. The chamber quieted out of respect for his age and status. I have trained warriors for 70 years, he said. I have seen countless students, thousands of techniques. I have always believed in the superiority of traditional methods. He paused, his ancient eyes sweeping the room. But today, a human child taught me something important. We have become stagnant. We pass down the same techniques for generations and we call it wisdom. But it's not wisdom. It's fear of change. He turned to Jiwoo. This young warrior showed us that our masters are beatable because they are predictable. That is not disrespect. That is the most valuable lesson we could learn. If we punish innovation, we doom ourselves to defeat against any opponent clever enough to think differently than we do. The chamber fell silent. When a Krolik's elder spoke, even the most argumentative instructors listened. The council head called for a vote. The tension was unbearable as each member indicated their position. Jiwoo watched, her bandaged hands clenched despite the pain. Finally, the council head announced the decision. By majority vote, the council rules that student Han Jiwoo's examination is valid. Furthermore, we recognize the need to evolve our training methods. Effective immediately, the Academy will establish a new program studying unconventional combat approaches, with emphasis on human tactical methodology. Relief flooded through Jiwoo so powerfully she felt dizzy. However, the council head continued, this decision comes with conditions. Han Jiwoo, you will assist Instructor Velthar in developing this new curriculum. Your methods will be documented, studied, and taught. You will help us understand how to train warriors who can think beyond traditional boundaries. Velthar approached Jiwoo as the chamber began to clear. It seems you're my assistant instructor now. At 24 years old. That's a new record. I just wanted to pass the examination, Jiwoo said. You did more than pass. You changed how we think about combat. He looked at her bandaged hands. Those will heal? Doctor says completely within a few days. Good, because we have work to do. Other species need to learn what you've taught me. That the strongest warrior isn't always the one with the most muscle or the sharpest blade. Sometimes it's the one who understands the battle no one else is seeing. Outside the chamber, Yuna threw her arms around Jiwoo carefully. You did it! You actually did it! Minho pulled her aside. You know what this means, right? Word is already spreading through military channels. The human who broke the instructor's sword. You're going to become famous. Humans across the galaxy are going to hear about this. I just wanted to prove we belong here. You did more than that. You proved we bring something unique to galactic civilization. Something valuable. He smiled. I'm proud of you, little sister. That night, back in their room, Jiwoo lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her hands throbbed despite the pain medication, but it was a good pain. The pain of accomplishment. Her communication device chimed. The grand arena was packed with more spectators than Jiwoo had expected. Students from every discipline filled the tiered seats along with instructors, researchers, and even some military observers visiting the station. The examination was always a major event, but something about this session had drawn extra attention. Perhaps word had spread about the human students attempting blade arts. Jiwoo sat in the waiting area with the other examinees, trying to keep her breathing steady. Her hands were wrapped in light bandages, more for protection than support. Under the bandages, her calluses felt thick and strange. She flexed her fingers repeatedly, making sure they were loose and ready. Yuna sat beside her along with Jihoon and the other human students. They had all drawn lots for their order. Jiwoo would go toward the end. She wasn't sure if that was good or bad luck. "Have you seen how many people are here?" Jihoon whispered. His face was pale. "I thought this would be a small class thing." "Too late to worry about that now," Yuna said, though she looked nervous too. The examination began. One by one, students entered the arena to face Veltar. The massive Draken stood in the center, holding his practice sword with casual confidence. He looked calm, patient, almost bored. The first student, a Krolix with stone-like skin, charged in aggressively. Velthar sidestepped smoothly and disarmed him with a flick of his blade. Time elapsed, 4 seconds. The second student tried a defensive approach, staying back and waiting for an opening. Veltar simply walked forward and systematically broke through the defense. 6 seconds, it continued like that. Some students showed skill and lasted longer. A fast insectoid managed 8 seconds by using quick dodges. A heavily armored student from a high-gravity world lasted 10 seconds through pure durability, but couldn't land a single effective strike. Then Rixvan entered, not competing, but demonstrating as a former record holder. The quadrupedal warrior moved with confidence, using unconventional angles and their natural stability. They ducked under strikes, circled constantly, forced Velthar to adjust his stance repeatedly. When the match ended, the timer showed 15 seconds. The crowd applauded respectfully. "That's what excellence looks like," Velthar announced to the watching students. Rixvan understood their own advantages and used them perfectly. They didn't try to fight like a draken. They fought like themselves. Jiwoo noticed her hands were shaking slightly. She closed them into fists, then released, focusing on her breathing like Sumin had taught her. More students went. Most lasted between 3 and 8 seconds. A few reached 10 or 12 seconds, earning approving nods from Velthar. The human students did about as well as expected. Their smaller size and lack of natural advantages showed, but they fought with determination. Yuna lasted 7 seconds, which was respectable. Finally, Jiwoo's name was called. The walk to the arena floor felt endless. Every eye in the building followed her. She heard whispers from the crowd, probably commenting on her size. She was small even by human standards, and she looked tiny compared to most of the other species present. Velthar watched her approach. His expression was neutral, but she thought she saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He had noticed her unusual training methods over the past weeks, though he had never commented on them. "Han Jiwoo," he said formally. "Are you ready?" "Yes, instructor." He gestured to the weapon rack. "Choose your practice sword." This was the moment. Jiwoo walked to the rack, looked at the various practice weapons, then did something that sent a murmur through the crowd. She selected a sword, carried it back toward the starting position, and set it down at her feet. The arena went silent. Velthar's eyes narrowed. "Pick up your weapon, student." Jiwoo straightened, meeting his gaze. "With respect, instructor, you taught us that combat is about control. You never specified what we had to control." The silence stretched. Several instructors in the stands leaned forward with interest. This was unprecedented. The examination rules required students to face Velthar in single combat, but they didn't explicitly require the use of weapons. No one had ever thought to try this before. Velthar studied her for a long moment. She could see him thinking, evaluating. Then something shifted in his expression. Not anger, but interest. "Very well," he said slowly. "If you wish to face me unarmed, that is your choice. But do not expect mercy. The examination is the same regardless." "I understand." He settled into his ready stance, sword held in both hands. "Begin." Velthar moved exactly as Jiwoo had predicted. The diagonal downward slash from right to left, meant to intimidate and end the fight immediately. She had watched him perform this opening move in dozens of recordings. She knew its exact arc, its timing, its speed. Instead of retreating or raising her hands to block, Jiwoo stepped forward, directly into the strike. Her hands moved with practiced precision, not grabbing for the blade's edge, which would have sliced her fingers off. Instead, she caught the flat of the blade between her palms at an angle, positioned so the momentum slid partially past rather than driving straight through. The impact sent shockwaves through her arms, but her conditioned hands held firm. The arena erupted in gasps and shouts. Belthar froze for a fraction of a second, pure surprise crossing his face. In 40 years of teaching, no one had ever done this. He pulled back immediately, trying to yank the sword free. But Jiwoo maintained her grip, moving with the weapon rather than fighting against it. She had practiced this specific scenario hundreds of times. Her hands knew what to do almost without thought. Belthar struck again, faster now, more controlled. He wasn't playing anymore. The blade came from a different angle, a horizontal slash. Again, Jiwoo intercepted it, not trying to stop the force, but to redirect it, using her superior reaction time and fine motor control to position her hands where the blade would be. The crowd was going insane. Nothing like this had ever happened in examination history. But Jiwoo knew she couldn't maintain this forever. Her hands were already screaming in pain despite the calluses. The impacts were tremendous. She had maybe 1 or 2 more catches in her before her hands would be too damaged to continue. She needed to end this now. Belthar attacked again, a thrust this time, fast, direct, meant to be unavoidable. But Jiwoo had studied him too well. She saw the micro-movements that preceded the attack, the shift of his weight, the tension in his shoulders, the direction of his focus. She moved before he completed the strike. Her hands caught the blade near the hilt where she would have maximum leverage. At the same instant, she stepped forward, deep into his space, closer than any opponent had ever dared to get. And then she twisted. Everything Jihoon had taught her about stress points in metal came into play. Everything Daehyun had told her about human grip strength. Everything Sumin had drilled into her about leverage and timing. Jiwoo applied rotational force at a precise angle, targeting the fusion lines in the blade's molecular structure. Her entire body worked together. Her legs drove upward, her core rotated. Her arms and hands applied torque at the exact point where the blade's layers met. She pushed her conditioned bones and muscles to their absolute limit. For one impossible moment, nothing happened. The sword held. Physics and engineering and the will of 2, fighters all balanced on a knife's edge. Then something gave way. With a sharp crack, the practice sword shattered. Pieces of the blade scattered across the arena floor, catching the light as they spun away. Belthar stood frozen, staring at the broken hilt in his hand. Jiwoo stood before him, breathing hard, her hands covered in blood from tears in her bandages, but she was standing, undefeated. The timer showed 12 seconds had passed, but no one was looking at it. The entire arena had gone silent in shock. Then the noise hit like a wave, shouts, cheers, arguments, disbelief. The human section went absolutely crazy, students jumping and screaming. Belthar looked from the broken blade to Jiwoo's face. Then he did something that shocked everyone even more than the broken sword. He laughed, deep, genuine laughter that rolled through the arena. He dropped the ruined hilt and raised his hands in a traditional Draken gesture of respect between equals. "Remarkable," he said, and his voice carried despite the noise. "In 40 years, no student has ever surprised me like this. You didn't defeat me with superior strength or speed. You defeated me with understanding. Understanding of materials, of leverage, of my own patterns and assumptions." He looked at her bleeding hands, and with willingness to endure pain for victory. That is true warrior spirit. Jiwoo felt her knees wobbling. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the pain in her hands was becoming overwhelming. But she managed to bow respectfully. "Thank you, instructor. You taught me everything I needed to know. I just applied the lessons differently." Medical staff rushed onto the floor to treat her hands. As they led her away, Jiwoo looked back to see Belthar still standing there studying the pieces of the broken sword with an expression of fascination. The first week was worse than Jiwoo had imagined. Every morning started with forms practice, repetitive sword movements meant to build muscle memory. Then came sparring, where she got knocked around by students who were simply bigger and stronger. The practice swords were padded, but impacts still left bruises that painted her arms in shades of purple and yellow. Belthar's teaching method focused on overwhelming your opponent. Use the weight of your blade to batter through their defense. Strike hard and fast until they made a mistake. For the alien students with natural strength and toughened skin, this worked well. For the humans, it was a nightmare. Maybe we should transfer to tactics or engineering, one of the other human students suggested during lunch. His name was Jihoon, and he had a split lip from that morning's practice. We're just not built for this. Yuna shook her head stubbornly. That's exactly what they expect. That will quit. Jiwoo picked at her food, barely listening. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying Velthar's movements. She noticed patterns in how he taught. He always assumed students would meet force with force, defend against a strong attack with a strong block, meet aggression with aggression. After classes ended, Jiwoo headed to the research wing instead of back to her room. The corridors here were quieter, lined with laboratories and study areas. She found the office she was looking for, Dr. Choi Dae-hyun's xenobiology department. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see a student. Can I help you? I have questions about human physiology, Jiwoo said. Compared to other species, Dae-hyun's expression shifted to interest. He was a researcher who rarely got to discuss his work with anyone. Sit down. What specifically? Everyone says humans are weak. But we made it to space, survived on Earth, built civilizations. We're not that weak. So what are we good at? Dae-hyun smiled. Finally, someone asks the right question. Here's the thing, humans aren't weak. You're just comparing yourselves to species that evolved completely different survival strategies. He pulled up images on his screen. Most sentient species evolved as either apex predators or herd animals. They got big, strong, fast, or armored. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. What does that mean? It means you're built for endurance. You can run for hours when most species would collapse from overheating. Your sweat system is incredibly efficient. You have remarkable fine motor control in your hands, better than almost any species. And your reaction time, especially for tracking moving objects, is exceptional. Jiwoo leaned forward. What about strength? Absolute strength? No, humans are weaker than most military species, but relative to body size, human grip strength is remarkable, and your bone density is very high, especially after you've conditioned them through training. Your ancestors had to throw spears, climb trees, and hang on to struggling prey. That legacy is still in your body. He pulled up more data. Here's something interesting. Most alien species have predictable stress responses, fight or flight, mostly hardwired. Humans have that too. But you also have this unusual ability to override your instincts through training. You can teach yourself to run toward danger instead of away from it, to stay calm when everything says panic. It's why human special forces are starting to get respect in military circles. Jiwoo left the office with her mind spinning. She made her way to the medical wing next, where she found Sora, one of the combat medics. Sora had been a soldier before becoming a medic, and she carried herself with quiet confidence. Let me guess, Sora said, looking at Jiwoo's bruises. Blade arts with Velthar? How did you know? All the humans from that class look like this by the end of week 1. Sit down, I'll patch you up. As she worked, Sora continued. You know, I was special forces before this. We had a saying, never fight the enemy's battle. Make them fight yours. What does that mean? It means if someone is bigger and stronger, don't get into a pushing match. Use speed, use technique, use the environment. There are human martial arts that were designed exactly for this. Ways to redirect force instead of meeting it. Ways to break balance, target joints, use an opponent's momentum against them. Sora finished bandaging a particularly bad bruise. Most aliens don't understand joint locks or pressure points. Their bodies are tougher, so they never develop techniques that require precision over power. That's your advantage, if you're willing to use it. Velthar teaches that combat is about control, Jiwoo said thoughtfully. He's right, but there's different kinds of control. He controls through superior force. You have to find a different way. That evening, Jiwoo returned to the training hall after hours. She wasn't alone. A few other dedicated students were there, including Thexilor, an insectoid whose species name she couldn't pronounce properly. Thexilor was surprisingly friendly, despite the language barrier. They communicated mostly through translation devices and gestures. Jiwoo practiced her forms, but she also started experimenting. She watched videos of human martial arts on her device, then tried to apply those principles to sword work, using circular motions to redirect instead of block, stepping offline from attacks instead of meeting them head-on, focusing on precision strikes to specific points rather than powerful swings. Thexilor watched with curiosity, then chittered something that translated as, strange technique, not standard. I'm trying something different, Jiwoo explained. The insectoid tilted its head. Different is good. Same techniques for centuries. Maybe time for new methods. They began training together sometimes. Thexler was fast, with 4 limbs that could strike from unexpected angles. Practicing against such a different body type forced Jiwoo to adapt constantly. She learned to read body language across species, the shift of weight that preceded movement, the tensing of muscles before a strike. One night, Thexler shared something interesting. Draken are strong. Scales are tough. But joints here, and here, the translator indicated shoulders, elbows, and knees, are weak points. Heavy muscle means full commitment to strikes. Once committed, hard to change direction. Jiwoo filed this information away carefully. She started watching Velthar even more closely during demonstrations. He was incredibly skilled, but Thexler was right. When Velthar struck, he committed fully to each movement. It made his attacks devastating, but it also made them predictable if you knew what to look for. 3 weeks into training, an announcement changed everything. Midterm examination in 4 weeks, Velthar declared. Each student will face me in single combat. The goal is not to defeat me, that's impossible at your skill level. The goal is to last as long as possible. 10 seconds is respectable, 15 seconds is excellent. 20 seconds has only been achieved twice in the past decade. The students looked at each other nervously. 4 weeks to prepare to face a master swordsman who had been training for longer than most of them had been alive. That night, Yuna found Jiwoo in their room, staring at training videos again. You know we can't actually beat him, right? The best we can hope for is not to embarrass ourselves too badly. What if we don't fight him the way he expects? Jiwoo asked. What do you mean? He spent his whole life mastering one style of combat. What if someone used a completely different approach? Yuna looked skeptical. Like what? We can't outfight him. No, but maybe we don't need to. Jiwoo pulled up a video of an ancient human technique called Shinken Dori, catching a blade with bare hands. What if the goal isn't to beat him in a sword fight? What if it's to break his assumptions about what a fight even is? That's crazy, Yuna said. But she didn't sound entirely convinced. Jiwoo spent the next days researching obsessively. She visited Daehyun again to learn about the materials used in practice blades. She talked to Jihoon about stress points in metal. She watched every available recording of Velthar's previous demonstrations, and she began conditioning her hands. At first, she just pressed her palms against hard surfaces for long periods. Then she started slapping her hands against padded surfaces, gradually increasing the force. It hurt. Her hands swelled and ached, but slowly calluses began to form. The small bones in her hands experienced tiny fractures that healed stronger, denser. Sora noticed during a medical check. What are you doing to your hands? Training, Jiwoo said simply. Sora looked at her for a long moment. You're planning something unconventional. Maybe. Good. Conventional won't work for humans here. Just be careful. Push too hard and you'll injure yourself permanently. With 3 weeks left, Jiwoo knew what she had to do. It was risky, possibly foolish, but it was the only chance she had. She wasn't going to beat Velthar at his own game. She was going to change the game entirely. With 3 weeks until the examination, Jiwoo changed everything about her training. While other students practiced their sword forms for hours, trying to perfect their technique and build strength, she barely touched her blade. Instead, she spent her time in ways that made the other human students think she had lost her mind. She sat in the research lab with Jihoon, the combat engineer, staring at molecular diagrams of sword blades. I don't understand what you want, Jihoon said, frustrated. These practice blades are designed to be nearly unbreakable. They're made from an alloy that can withstand tremendous force. Nearly unbreakable isn't the same as completely unbreakable, Jiwoo insisted. Everything has a weak point. How are they forged? Jihoon pulled up the manufacturing specifications. They're created through a layering process at high temperatures. Multiple alloys fuse together for flexibility and strength. He zoomed in on a cross-section. See these lines? Those are the fusion points between layers. Could those be weak points? Theoretically, yes. If you applied force at exactly the right angle, targeting those fusion lines, you could potentially cause a fracture. But the amount of force required would be enormous, and you'd need to hit a specific spot that's only a few millimeters wide. What if you didn't just apply force? What if you used leverage and torque at the same time? Jihoon looked at her strangely. You're not planning to break a sword, are you? Just curious, Jiwoo said, but she memorized every detail he showed her. Her next stop was Sumin, a human fighter pilot who taught hand-to-hand combat classes in her spare time. Sumin had been a soldier before joining the pilot corps, and she still moved like someone ready for a fight at any moment. I need to learn about distance and timing, Jiwoo told her. Sumin raised an eyebrow. You're in weapons training. Distance and timing are part of that. No, I mean really close distance, inside weapon range. Understanding dawned on Sumin's face. Ah, you want to learn about entering the pocket? She stood up and gestured for Jiwoo to do the same. In close combat, there's a distance where long weapons become liabilities. Too close to swing effectively. That's the pocket. Getting there without getting hit is the hard part. For the next hour, Sumin drilled Jiwoo on reading body language. See how my shoulder drops slightly before I punch? Every species has tells like that. Learn to read them, and you can predict movement before it happens. That's how you enter the pocket. You move where they're going to create empty space, not where they already are. They practiced until Jiwoo could slip inside Sumin's reach consistently. Her body learned to recognize the micro movements that predicted strikes. The shift of weight, the tension in muscles, the direction of focus. You're getting better, Sumin admitted. But why do you need this for sword fighting? Maybe I don't plan to sword fight, Jiwoo said. The most painful part of her training happened in the privacy of the training hall after hours. Jiwoo set up padded boards at different heights and began practicing the techniques she'd seen in the ancient videos, catching blades with bare hands. The principle was sound. You didn't grab the edge, which would slice your hands apart. You caught the flat of the blade between your palms, angled so the momentum slid past rather than cutting. It required perfect timing, precise hand placement, and hands tough enough to withstand the impact. At first, she used the softest padded trainers moving at slow speeds. Even then, her hands ached after each session. But gradually, she increased the difficulty. Harder surfaces, faster movements. Her hands developed thick calluses. The bones strengthened from repeated stress. Thexler found her one night, hands bleeding slightly as she practiced against a mechanical trainer. You are hurting yourself, the insectoid said through its translator. Controlled damage, Jiwoo replied, wrapping her hands. Human bones get stronger when they heal from small fractures. It's how our ancestors developed strong bones for throwing and climbing. This is your plan? Catch Instructor's blade? Part of it. Thexler chittered in what might have been respect or concern. Very dangerous. Very unusual. Velthar has fought thousands of opponents. None have tried this. That's the point. She also spent hours watching recordings. Every demonstration Velthar had given. Every practice session that was recorded. Every competition match from his younger days. Jiwoo watched them until she could close her eyes and see his movements perfectly, and she found the pattern. Against weaker opponents, especially in formal demonstrations, Velthar always opened the same way. A diagonal downward slash from right to left meant to disarm and intimidate in one motion. He'd done it hundreds of times over the years. It was muscle memory, automatic. He probably didn't even think about it anymore. That opening move would be her chance. Her only chance. Yuna watched Jiwoo's obsessive training with growing concern. You're going to hurt yourself before the examination even happens. I'm careful. You're barely sleeping. Your hands look terrible, and you're not even practicing sword forms anymore. What if Velthar sees this as disrespectful? Jiwoo paused in wrapping her hands. Would you rather I practice normally and last 5 seconds? Or try something different and maybe, just maybe, surprise him? I'd rather you not break your hands trying to catch a sword. But despite her worry, Yuna started helping. She would operate the practice machines, gradually increasing the speed to push Jiwoo's limits. Other human students noticed the strange training methods and whispered among themselves. Some thought Jiwoo was wasting her time. Others were curious enough to watch. 1 week before the examination, something unexpected happened. Rixavan, a quadrupedal warrior who had graduated the previous year but stayed on as an assistant, approached Jiwoo during her late-night practice. I've been watching you, Rixavan said. Their species communicated through a combination of sounds and body posture. Your technique is unlike anything taught here. Is that a problem? No, it's interesting. Rixavan settled into a resting position. I held the record for longest survival against Instructor Velthar. 15 seconds. Do you know why most students fail so quickly? They fight his fight. Exactly. They try to be better swordsmen than a master swordsman. It's impossible. I lasted longer because I used my species' natural advantages. 4 legs for stability, low center of gravity, quick direction changes. I didn't fight like a draken. I fought like me. What are you saying? I'm saying you're right to train differently. Felthar is brilliant, but he's been fighting the same way for decades. He knows how to counter every traditional technique. But something completely unconventional? Rixavan made a gesture that might have been a shrug. He won't know what to do immediately, and in combat, hesitation is everything. The advice bolstered Jiwoo's confidence. She intensified her training, pushing through the pain and exhaustion. Her hands became tough, covered in calluses that felt like leather. Her muscle memory developed to the point where she could catch slow-moving blades without thinking, her body reacting faster than conscious thought. Sumin tested her one evening, attacking with a padded blade at quarter speed, then half speed. Jiwoo's hands moved precisely, catching the flat of the blade each time. That's remarkable, Sumin admitted. I've never seen anything like it. But you know it only takes one mistake, right? Miss your timing by a fraction of a second and you'll be hurt badly. I know. And you're sure about this? Jiwoo looked at her scarred, calloused hands. No, but I'm doing it anyway. 3 days before the examination, she stopped the intense physical training. Her hands needed time to heal, to let the microfractures set properly. Instead, she focused on mental preparation. She visualized the fight over and over, Felthar's opening move, her response, the single moment where she would commit to a plan that was either brilliant or insane. She sent a message to her brother. Remember when you said I should show them what humans can do? Yes, why? I'm about to show them something they've never seen before. Should I be worried? Probably. The night before the examination, Jiwoo couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what she was about to attempt. Every rational part of her mind said it was foolish. The odds were overwhelming. She could injure herself, embarrass herself, fail completely. But another part of her, the part that made humans climb mountains just because they were there, that made them explore space despite the dangers, that made them persist when stronger species would give up, that part said to try anyway. Yuna's voice came from the other bed. You awake? Yeah. Are you really going to do this crazy thing you've been training for? Yeah. There was a long pause. Then don't get hurt. And if you somehow pull this off, I'm going to tell everyone I was your roommate. Jiwoo smiled in the darkness. Deal. Tomorrow would change everything. One way or another. The transport shuttle descended through the artificial atmosphere of Station Valenhall, and Jiwoo pressed her face against the window. She had never seen anything like this before. The massive orbital station hung in space like a metal flower, its petals stretching out in all directions. Each section housed different training facilities for the dozens of alien species that came here to learn the art of war. First time off Earth? Asked the passenger next to her, a tall woman with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms. Yes, Jiwoo admitted, pulling back from the window. I'm here for the Combat Institute. The alien woman's eyes widened slightly. A human? In combat training? She didn't say it with cruelty, just surprise. Jiwoo had gotten used to that reaction over the past few weeks. When humanity joined the galactic community 3 years ago, everyone had opinions about them. Humans were interesting, clever, good with technology and diplomacy. But warriors, most aliens laughed at the idea. Humans were small, soft, and weak, compared to species that had evolved on high-gravity worlds or in hostile environments. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom. What could they possibly offer in combat? Jiwoo's brother Minho had been one of the first humans accepted into galactic military service. He had fought in a border skirmish where his quick thinking saved his entire unit. When he came home on leave, he told Jiwoo she should apply to the Institute. They don't understand us yet, he had said. Show them what humans can do. The shuttle docked and Jiwoo grabbed her small bag. Everything she owned fit inside it. She followed the flow of students through the pristine corridors. Aliens of every size and shape moved around her. Some had scales, others had fur or feathers. A few floated in specialized gravity fields. They all looked strong, dangerous, and confident. She felt very small. The dormitory assignment led her to a room on the human wing. The door slid open to reveal a young woman unpacking her belongings. She looked up and smiled. You must be my roommate. I'm Yuna. Jiwoo, she replied, setting down her bag. The room was small but clean, with 2 beds and a shared workspace. Excited for tomorrow? Yuna asked. First day of training. I've been practicing with practice swords for months. Have you chosen your discipline yet? Blade arts, Jiwoo said. Yuna's expression shifted slightly. That's Instructor Velthar's division. He's supposed to be incredible. Also terrifying. He's Draken, the big reptile species. They've been swordmasters for like 1,000 years. That night, Jiwoo couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about tomorrow, about what she had gotten herself into. Through the window, she could see the stars and the curve of the planet below. Somewhere down there, her brother was on patrol. He believed in her. She had to believe in herself. Morning came too quickly. The Blade Arts training hall was enormous, with high ceilings and polished floors. About 40 students gathered there, representing maybe a dozen species. Jiwoo counted only 5 other humans in the group. Then Instructor Velthar entered and the room fell silent. He was massive. Nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark green scales that looked like armor. His arms were thick with muscle and his hands ended in claws. But his eyes were what caught Jiwoo's attention. Sharp, intelligent, missing nothing. He moved with the grace of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering his body. Welcome, his voice rumbled through the hall. I am Instructor Velthar. You are here to learn the way of the blade. Some of you come from warrior cultures. Some of you have trained since childhood. Others, his gaze swept across the humans, are completely new to this. He picked up a practice sword from a rack. Even in his large hands, it looked deadly. Combat is about control, he said, walking slowly in front of the assembled students. Control your weapon. Control your opponent. Control the battlefield. Without control, you are merely flailing. With control, you become unstoppable. He stopped in front of a Krolik student, one of the stone-skinned species known for their strength. You, attack me. The student hesitated only a moment before charging forward with his practice blade raised. Velthar moved like lightning. His sword flicked out, struck the student's weapon at a precise angle, and sent it spinning across the floor. The Krolik student stumbled, off balance, and disarmed. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. Next, Velthar said. One by one, students tried. Each one was disarmed within seconds. Some lasted a bit longer than others, but the result was always the same. Velthar made it look effortless. He was stronger, faster, and vastly more experienced than any of them. When it was Jiwoo's turn, her hands were sweating. She picked up a practice sword. It felt heavier than she expected. She approached Velthar, trying to remember the basic forms she had studied from the training videos. She didn't even see him move. One moment she was raising her sword. The next it was flying through the air and her hands were empty and stinging. Too slow, Velthar said, not unkindly. Too hesitant. Next. Jiwoo retrieved her sword and returned to the line, her face burning. Behind her, she heard alien students laughing quietly. Not at her specifically, but at all the humans. They were so obviously outmatched. The rest of the day involved basic forms and conditioning exercises. By the end, Jiwoo's arms ached and her hands were covered in blisters. Yuna looked just as exhausted when they trudged back to their room. That was brutal, Yuna groaned, collapsing on her bed. Did you see how fast he moved? How are we supposed to compete with that? Jiwoo sat at the small desk, flexing her sore hands. Her mind kept replaying the demonstration. Velthar's technique was perfect, but it relied on specific things: superior strength, superior speed, the assumption that his opponents would fight in a certain way. Yuna, she said slowly, do you know anything about human martial arts? Like ancient stuff from Earth? Not really. Why? Just thinking. Jiwoo pulled up her communication device and sent a message to her brother. It was late in his time zone, but he always said she could contact him any time. The reply came surprisingly quickly. Can't sleep either? What's up? She told him about the first day, about Velthar's demonstration. He says combat is about control, but his control is based on being stronger and faster than everyone else. What if you can't be stronger or faster? There was a pause before Minho's response appeared. Then you find a different kind of control. Our ancestors didn't have the biggest claws or the thickest armor. They had something else. They could think, adapt, and use techniques that turned an opponent's strength against them. Ever heard of Taekyon or the old military arts? Not really. Look them up. They were designed for exactly what you're describing. Fighting when you're not the strongest. Using leverage, timing, and technique instead of brute force. The aliens don't think like that because most of them never had to. They evolved to be the apex predators on their worlds. Jiwoo thanked him and started searching through the human cultural database. Videos appeared showing ancient masters demonstrating throws, locks, and strikes that relied on precision rather than power. One technique particularly caught her attention, a method for redirecting sword strikes using the flat of the blade against itself to create leverage. It looked impossible. It looked insane. But something in her mind started turning, connecting pieces together. Felthar was an incredible warrior, but he fought the way he had been taught. The way everyone had been taught for centuries. What if someone fought differently? What if someone refused to play by those rules? Yuna was already snoring softly. Jiwoo turned off the lights but continued studying on her device, the glow illuminating her determined face. She had 6 months until the midterm examination. 6 months to figure out something that centuries of tradition said was impossible. Outside the window, the stars wheeled slowly by. Jiwoo didn't notice. She was too busy planning.